Hello everyone, today I wanted to use this video because I get this question asked all the time, but I couldn't really answer at least through a video like this because I was an employee at Accenture. And the question really is how was your experience at Accenture? So today I'm gonna really walk through everything that I've done at Accenture and the good, the bad, what would I recommend, advice. So this could be a pretty long video. I will see when I edit, but it's really just gonna be something that's very honest. I don't even have this video prepared in terms of the bullet points I'm gonna cover. But the first thing is I wanna start off and say that for people who are interested in Accenture, I think it is great for most people, but not great for all people, if that makes sense. Because a lot of times people ask me oh, what do you think of Accenture as a company? And it's really what I think of Accenture as a company, but you still need to make your informed decision as to if it's a good fit for you by talking to people in your direct area of interest, as well as people in your region. Because I can only speak for someone who is in the Workday Financial Practice, who was an analyst and a senior analyst who got hired through the TDP program, the Technology Development Program, in the New York office through the graduate program from Boston University. That's as finite as I can go. Your experience being a graduate student, being a college student in a different area, in a different country, continent, or even not even in Workday Financial, or not even in tech, maybe you're in a strategy and consulting, you're working in a tech project, will be completely different from mine. And every time I speak to someone who come in through TDP just like I did, they have different experiences. Some have really bad ones, some have really good ones, and some have in between as well. So I really want to make that as a disclaimer that whatever I'm saying, take it as if it's my personal experience, and then you're gonna still have to make your decision from multiple data points, not just from my data point, but from online, from people you know. That's the beauty of networking, is you really want to learn about how it's and honestly, at the end of the day, even if you find exactly the same person, same style, same type, same background as you coming into Accenture for whatever role you're interested in, it may be different because it really depends on how the firm is developing, the actual experience of the project, the client. If you have the same background, same everything, and then you have a client that all of a sudden said hey, we need you on this project, you have the skill set we need, but that project is crashing and burning. Of course, your experience are not going to be as ideal, but you're going to still learn a lot from it. So right into it, I'm going to first start off and say my background. How did I get into Accenture? If you haven't checked out my videos over here, I talked about how I got my job in technology consulting, as well as my interview process at Accenture. So just some overall background. I came in through Boston University. I did not have an internship. This was actually something that it was through my senior year fall semester or so. It was September, and I applied through my school. So Boston University was a target school for Accenture at the time, and I don't know if that's going to change based off of the time you're watching it, but as that time I was applying through it, I went to the career fair to try and make an impression. The recruiter that was actually looking at the applications of that school was there. I think I made a great impression based off of that. And then so after that, I went through the interview process, which was 2 rounds. One is a behavioral interview, which was on campus at the career center, and then the other one was a behavioral interview and a case interview at their Boston office. So I was going for their New York office, and then after that, I think from what I saw, it was some kind of system where they're okay, does New York have some kind of vacancy? Even though I was coming from Boston, they were targeting for Boston, but I did allow, they did ask you for preference, and my preference was New York because I'm from New York. I live here currently, and back then too. I mean, other than living in the dorm, but that was a big reason. So I got my offer on September 2017, and I started at September 2018. And one thing that I want to say is that a big tip, if you're wondering when you should start, if you have the ability to change your start date, try to start earlier in the year than later in the year, because you need to have enough ammunition for the performance cycle to be able to promote you in the first place. For me, I missed it. I was literally right at the end, but not to mention in general, a lot of projects are very slow around the end of the year, October, November, December. There's just either no projects are going to start that late, or that there are, but they're not ramping up just yet. So you want to be able to, if you have the ability to change, and if you have no plans, in my case, I had a lot of travel. I wanted to get all the travel done. I wanted to find my apartment in New York City first and then start. But if you have the luxury to be able to change it to make it even go earlier, or maybe if you do want to go earlier is better. Let's say summertime. because then you'll have a lot more people, a lot more projects to be able to work with, and then you'll be able to show a little bit more in your performance cycle. For me, because I started really late, like in around September time, like that was pretty late where there weren't a lot of projects. So all I did was train. That's actually how I had a lot of my certifications, is that I just did a lot of training. It was like 4 to 5 trainings. And at that point I was like more certified than most people in the practice because I had all the time in the world. I was on the bench, but technically not really, because while I was on my financials core training, my second year was like between my first and second week, it's a 2-week program, and then you have the certification exam at the end. Between that, it was like, I think like a Monday or Tuesday of the second week, I actually was like, hey, talking to my TFS, my talent fulfillment specialist, now it's called HR partner at Accenture. I don't know if it's going to change in the future by the time you're watching this, but I was talking to her and say like, hey, are there any projects that you have proposed me to? And just to explain the staffing process, if you haven't checked the video over here, is that like at that time, you have a lot of different ways you can get projects. You can either network and find projects, you can be reached out to. I know people who like had very interesting and good skill sets coming into Accenture, entry level or not, they may have got plucked before they even started. For me, like they were looking for Workday financials and they can't really look for you until you get certified. But for me, they were already proposing me in the chance that I did get accepted, or that I passed the exam. And of course I did. So when I passed it, they were like, okay, these are the 3 that we were looking at. And I was like, oh, WWF, that sounds pretty cool. So I actually reached out to the financial lead at that particular project, and then boom, I was able to get it within just a lunch in Chicago, because that's actually where the training was. And so just want to say that like for the clients I want to mention today, I can only mention WWF because that is the only one that's publicly available. The others, I'm just going to mention what industry they were, but I will talk about like all the projects that I've had, the scale, the types of work that I've had, what kind of people I was working with. So that was my very first project. And then later that month, I actually got signed up for a pharmaceutical company that's based in the US. And I was able to go to Amsterdam and Denmark and Iceland. I'll go a little bit more into that. But after that, I was like, okay, I've got all of these trainings. And at this point, I've met a lot of people in the financial team, specifically on this project for WWF, for particularly on the consulting team. The client didn't know me at the time. So at that point, I was like getting to know them and then like asking them for tips. But I also was going to the office. So I know it's a little bit different for people who are doing remote onboarding. But for me, I was going into the office, and people said like, if you really want to do well, network as much as you can. And that's exactly what I did. The good thing was that personally for me, the Workday practice actually was, for most part, was through the day 9 practice at Accenture. And then because of that, they still had the old office that day 9 had through the acquisition. So I went to this office and it didn't feel like corporate. When you go to corporate, you're going to imagine like the typical consulting vibes, but then you go to this acquisition, which is a smaller firm, smaller company. So they already had that startup vibe that everyone talks about. They had like a ping pong table, they had like a big TV, they had a lot of beer, all that kind of stuff. So I went there and everyone was kind of chill, you know, like, so it was very easy to be friends with them, and then also in general, like interact with them, ask them for advice. And at this point, this was like before I even started my training, as well as after my training. I went there regularly, like maybe every day at a certain point, and then after that I kind of teetered off to like twice or 3 times a week. But at this point, this was actually where I was getting my name across. Like everyone kind of knew me as like the person who orders the food, because I know where all the food is. Or at a certain point, like the office champions at that time actually were busy because they had a lot of client work and I just had nothing, or that I was just training, or in general, like just didn't even have that much even when I was on a project at that time. So I start ordering, and then eventually, because I was a Girl Scout and my people lead at that time was called career counselor, knew that I was in Girl Scouts and that I always wanted to give back, so do a lot of community service, is that they proposed me to be like, oh, the Day 9 Cares lead. So I started to do a lot of community service events for the actual Workday practice in the New York office. And then after that, they were like, okay, we're gonna step down. We still have like other obligations we want to do, but we do want to bring you on as office champion. At this point, they like opened it up to everyone, but I was like, oh, I want to be office champion. That sounds cool. I'm already kind of doing it, so why not? So that's how my journey as office champion started, was that like I already put myself out there through volunteering to pay for food. I mean, of course I'm gonna be expensing it. I'm not gonna like pay it out and not get paid for it. And then from that, I did a lot of community service events that showed that I had the capabilities of organizing events, which at that point I think was doing like Meals on Wheels, city Meals on Wheels. So it was like delivering lunches to people that are bedridden or people who are stuck at home because they either don't have the ability to leave their home, or that those were the days that their aides weren't there, but they're typically going to be like senior citizens, and they were all based in Manhattan. So we went on rides, we went to this area where we picked up the meals, and then we just distributed them. Then after that, at this point, I had this other, so that we had two projects at this point. I was doing more partial staffing. So there's WWF, and then there's the pharmaceutical company that's based in New Jersey. For lead of the pharmaceutical company client, I was actually doing banking and settlement. So that was the first time I was leading, and I never worked on banking and settlement. So this was kind of like a little bit of a shock, but I had to learn along the way. And then there was also for the WWF one, I was supporting for supplier accounts, procurement, business assets, as well as banking and settlement with two different people. Like one particular lead consultant was working on supplier accounts, procurement, and business assets. And then when it came to banking and settlement was another consultant, was actually the financial lead of that project. Eventually, I took over all of them. Banking and settlement, I took a little bit more, but I didn't actually take over them. But it was just a lot of work because eventually that lead consultant left Accenture, and then I took over all of the work streams. So from those particular ones, I learned a lot, either about Workday, about consulting, working with clients, but also in general leading. When it comes to the Workday financial practice, particularly because we're very small, we're limited staffed, and because it's just like a practice that's not built out as much, and this is the same across like all other consulting firms, it's not just Accenture, is that like financials is pretty small. HCM is like what Workday is typically known for, so more clients get them, more people go for that, there's more demand for that. With financials, is like a very niched kind of software that like if you have a particular need, if you want this, then this is it. Plus HCM, everyone kind of knows about it, you have exposure to it as an employee, as a candidate, but then when your financials, only really the finance and accounting teams are working on it, unless you're filling out an expense report as an employee. So most people don't even know the area of the software that I'm working on in the first place. But I had to kind of learn on the job because I did come from like a finance management, information systems, and strategy innovation background. But, you know, finance is not the same as accounting. Even though Workday Financials says financials, it's really accounting. And even like when it comes to school, I only took 2 classes of accounting, and then I kind of understood everything from how everything worked through my previous internships. One, like my finance internship of seeing like how AP and AR work, that's like the only exposure I had to real applications of finance, as well as like supply chain from knowing like my mom was in supply chain and logistics. I also had internships in retail, so I had an idea of like how it worked. But for the most part, I had to learn a lot of it on the job. When it came to a lot of the particular like mindset that comes into it, it was something that was helpful from school, but it wasn't something that like would change the way that I did work. A lot of it was learning on the job. You have to be flexible, and they were looking for that in the interview process. So even if you didn't know anything, if you have that skill set of being flexible, learning on the job, and being able to lead, and being able to deal with like uncertain situations, you're pretty much set no matter what you do. Everything else you're just gonna have to learn, and you have to be willing to learn. Because like for consulting, like specifically in tech, you have to be certified, you have to be trained. You're not gonna look that credible to the client, as well as you won't even know what you're gonna talk about. So a lot of times when I'm leading these particular meetings, I had to kind of figure out like, okay, I can't prepare all of this. I don't have the experience that everyone's talking about. But what I did do was that I was preemptively like, okay, what did the client want from the previous call or previous meeting, depending on if it was in person. At this point, my WWF ones were in person, and a lot of the calls were online. Vice versa for the pharmaceutical company. I actually have never been on site other than when I was in Europe for those few sessions, as well as going into their New Jersey office. But particularly when it came to those, I had to think about like, okay, what are the kind of questions? What are their problems that they have? So I could prepare for it ahead of time, because I didn't have that guidance when it came to leading them eventually. And because these were my first projects too, I didn't have that. So I had to like, okay, look it up on like Workday Community, which is like almost like open source, but it's like for all the implementers, all the people that are administrators, or it's like available to people who work with Workday basically, to figure out all the questions, to play around in the system. A lot of what I did was playing around in the system. Like, okay, is this possible? Well, I'm not gonna look it up. I'm gonna just do it in a system and see if it works. If it doesn't work, what are the issues? Like, what are the hurdles that I've been coming through? What are the issues? How can we mitigate those hurdles? How do we make it better? So essentially, I'm trying to attack everything at multiple angles. And then so when I go into the calls, I'm prepared for like whatever questions they ask. Of course, I'll always have like some particular times when I didn't see a particular angle that they're going for, but that's why I typically have people on the team, or I just table it for later. So a lot of time it's like a kind of skill. The first year I learned a lot, like this is everything I learned. Second year was really just like honing in my craft of Workday, as well as like working with different types of clients, because you may have difficult clients, you may have really good clients. You want to get a plethora of experiences of all these different clients and industries. They're like the tiny intricacies that come into it. So now when it came to year 2, and like I mentioned, I did not qualify for the performance round because I started a little bit late, but if you were like in June, July, you may have gotten some kind of bonus at a certain point. But then when it came into like my time, like I just only had like 3, maybe not even like 3 to 4 months of showing things that at that point I was just training a lot. So when it came to the second year, I did get promoted in the next performance cycle, which was the full year cycle. And that was, I got promoted to senior analyst in my December 1st, effective December 1st of 2019. Yeah, 2019. So honestly, I did not think I was gonna get promoted. I was like, I've only shown 1 year of experience. Like all these people who have been here with the same level, like level 11, we called it for when it comes to analysts, have been here for like 2, maybe 3 years. Why would I get promoted after like not even 1 year? But I got promoted. I was really happy. I got a good base pay increase and a good bonus. Not so much bonus increase, but like, you know, pretty much like if you get a base pay increase, you're gonna get a slightly lower bonus, but it will all work out. So at that point, my WWF project has pushed the go live. So I had to be on the project for another year. And then the pharmaceutical company ended up finishing. So at this point, I was actually working on, so my next project was a insurance company based in Wisconsin. And actually this was because someone was rolling off the project to go to another project. And it's because like that other project was more high priority and I was available on the bench because I was done with the pharmaceutical client. So after that, I came in for this insurance company and we were right in the middle. It was like really right before testing. So I had to go in for, okay, any like resolving issues that they had from previously, as well as like preparing for testing. So for particularly this client was actually, I was leading probably the most work streams I've done, which is supplier accounts, procurement, and banking and settlements. I was leading those 3, as well as at a certain point for WWF, I was leading the 4 work streams. So at a certain point, I've done like all of them. And that particular insurance client had 3 people only on the entire financial team. Typically there's like 3 to 5 people, but 3. And then I was like only 1 year in at this point. I had to do this all myself. But a lot I was able to carry on from the nonprofit for WWF because it's pretty similar at a certain point, except for like the small differences. That's the part where you get like, ooh, it's a little bit different. Let me try things around and play it around. That's the fun part. But after that, I got it pretty much all set down. But you have to kind of learn because it's a different kind of mindset. Like all of a sudden you're walking into a room, you don't know a single person and you're already expected to know the answers. You're gonna have to deal with that a lot in consulting. And particularly that was like my experience with this project because I came in the middle of a project. So after that, I came in for another project at a financial institution based in Rhode Island as a client. As like 2 or 3 months. It was just like support for helping out another person that was rolling off to go to a different project. And so this was like the part where I eventually helped her out. And that's what I ended up doing is like it was like a 101 basically, where I was going to do a lot of reporting, composite reporting, and then as well as helping a little bit on banking or expenses. And this was with one person, and it was mostly for their financial administrator. I was working with her, and this is like very little hours. It's like 5 to 10 hours. And at this point, I had three projects at the same time. I had 3 projects at the same time in 2019, I think. Yeah, it was 2019 when I did that. And then after that, so when it came to 2020, that's where I ended up rolling off of that insurance company. I at a certain point finished WWF around like January, February. And then at this point, I already started this like project when it came to a health insurance company based in in North Carolina. And this one was the one that was here for 2 years at a certain point. So I was here on a first part was actually to support functional support on procurement integration. So supplier portal or P-cards, procurement cards. So a lot of that, like I came in for the functional support of it. You can do the integrations on your own as an integration consultant, but then the client won't know like the configuration that needs to go into. Or I'm also the one that helps them like provide the business use case or like the consulting part of it. So that's what I ended up doing for that for about 3 months or so. And at this point, this was actually where they're like, oh, I like Christine. We want you for AMS support. AMS support, I think, is specific to Accenture. I think that's the term, which is basically like post-production support, but this is a little bit different. So a lot of these projects have hypercare, which is like for after you've gone live, you have like all these like hypercare, which is basically you're on call for any issues that pop up to fix things or for any enhancements or to put them on the roadmap kind of thing. But then for this was like you're there for 2-3 years on any issues that happen, like incidences or enhancements that you may want to do, like short implementations. They've already gone live in Workday, so that typically is what AMS support is. So I was AMS support for 50% on this particular client. At this point, I finished all the other projects. And then at a certain point, 2 people had to get rolled off. And then I think it was like February, March, January, something around that time, I went full time for 3 to 4 months. And then after that, it went back down to 50%. So that entire time, this was actually during the pandemic. I've never met this client in person. Actually, no, this was in 2020 when I was working on this. And then after that, when I rolled off of that, I had the health insurance client that I was talking to you about. And this is the one where I ended up doing procurement integrations. And then after that, they're like, oh, I like Christine. Why don't we do AMS support for that? So once I did AMS support, this is actually my first time where I worked with an offshore team in India. And this client is all based in North Carolina. At this point, this was like during the pandemic, so a lot of people were remote. I've never met any of them in person, except for maybe some people that were on the team that I've met already on a project. Like for example, one person that I met on the US team, at least, I met previously because she was in the WWF project. So I did meet her when we were in DC at a certain point. So when I was actually there, like I did a lot of incidences and enhancements in my particular areas, which I've been pretty much doing in a lot of my work streams, which is basically supplier accounts, procurement, business assets, and banking settlement. Eventually, I did like capital projects because that's what I did with WWF when it came to assets. But that's mostly what I did for this health insurance client based in North Carolina for 2 years. And then at a certain point, like when it came to the part where I was rolling off, which was actually, I was rolling off December 2021. So it was like a full, almost like a 1.5 year, almost a full 2 years at this point. I was really trying to find projects because at this time, the pandemic either was giving people issues with, oh, we need to focus on our employees. We need money to fund that or some shit or something like that. But then they didn't have time or the money or resources to be able to do a Workday Financials implementation. So those were put on hold, or that the contracts were not being signed on time, or that like maybe other projects were signed, but then they didn't think of me as like the first priority because I was working on a project and there's other people that are on the bench. So that was like my personal experience. I tried to do a lot of trainings. At this point, I've done like 15 trainings, 15 certifications, and I didn't get anything. Like I really was trying to push for projects, but I just didn't get anything. Like I was really trying to train so I could be top of the class of talent. At a certain point, I was like the second most certified person in the Accenture practice for Workday Financials. Still nothing. And then at a certain point, that's where check out that video as to like, okay, what happened after that and why I ended up leaving Accenture. It's not the big picture, and I'm gonna actually have a video specifically on that coming out soon where I explain like the issues with consulting, because this is not an Accenture thing. This is actually something that is like all across consulting, and it depends on your luck. As I mentioned before, like no matter what background you have, no matter what firm, your team, sometimes it's all about luck as to like the type of project. How's the project going? How's your team handling your project? Sometimes you may have to deal with that, and because of that, it's so uncertain. And a lot of times you may have to take the hit on that, which is what ended up happening to me. So definitely check out that video, because that was a big part as to like, oh, maybe I should look at outside of Accenture. I really thought I was gonna be at Accenture for a long period of time. And then I was like, okay, this may not be for me then. Like I did like Accenture as a company, and here I'm gonna go into like what I liked about Accenture, what I didn't like about Accenture, the issues. So I liked Accenture because it's so diverse. It was like the most diverse company I've ever worked at, where I had like women, men, I had like different backgrounds, educational backgrounds, like they were a veteran, and also like even their interests, their educational backgrounds. Were they MBA? Were they a master's? Were they interpretive dance major? It was like all these different types of things, and even like the types of people that were there. Like I actually really thought I was gonna be like, oh, it's just gonna be a lot of, you know, like stuck up people like what you see in consulting. But when it comes to Accenture, it was not like that. It felt like very homey. Like a lot of people there were human, and if you were working in technology consulting, that was mostly the case. However, because I am kind of skewed in the first place, which is why I mentioned it, that the Workday practice came through an acquisition. Oh my God, my cats are jumping for the door. Because we came from an acquisition from a startup-like company already. I have a kind of skewed background already of that because I had a really fun time with people. I enjoyed it. I had fun. I had friends. And because of that, like, it just made it easy for you to just get sucked in. While if you were to be already isolated through like technology development program or consulting development program where you're not siloed into an area, you may not have a community already to begin with. And you're gonna feel very lonely. So it's like a pro and con because I got put into Workday Financials almost immediately through to my background. And I didn't really like that. And that's like, check out the video over there to really learn a little bit more about that. But because of that, I had a community to go into in the first place. And the background of the practice was really good. It was like people liked it. People enjoyed themselves. They enjoyed each other. So it was a really great community. Accenture is a big company, but like because of that, it felt like a small company in a big company. And I can't say that's going to be the experience for everyone, but that was a really good experience for me personally. And I was actually able to make friends. And I know a lot of people in consulting may feel like, oh, it's competitive, and it really does depend on the firm. There are, I have to say this though, some stereotypes that people can think about from particular firms. Sometimes it's very true. You go to consulting humor, you go to like consulting comedy, like all those memes of particular firms. For the most part, a lot of the people from those firms, majority, do kind of fit into those stereotypes. You're gonna give me hate comments, but I do want to say that like the people that I've met through my training, because we do come in through Workday training. These trainings were for Workday Financials, were all done through Workday. So I met a lot of people from different firms, and they would always speak up, communication, and a lot of my trainings were in person in the first 2 years, and then after that was remote. So I did get to see how they interact, and especially in projects. Yeah. So I would say Accenture has like the most chill, but also high performing kind of people that I've met. They were human. They weren't like go-getters where they're like stepping all over you to get to where they need to go. There's still a group like that out there, especially in management and strategy consulting. I don't want to say that, but the stereotypes are kind of true. They come from a source of truth, a part of the truth, okay? It wasn't like all the truth. But yeah, that's like exactly what happened for the people aspect. When it came to like other things that I liked is that like what exactly, if you are interested in technology, Accenture is great for you, especially if you don't know where you want to go. And if you come from technology development program, that's even better because you can do whatever you want. However, I was siloed. If you were siloed and you don't want to be in that area, that's an issue. Accenture is known for software implementation, so SAP, Oracle, Workday, like those kind of systems you may be stuck on, and it may not be glamorous because you're kind of stuck on that software and you can't do all the cool things like, oh, Disney with the magic bands. Like that is actually like maybe even a different area of technology. It's like maybe digital or interactive. But that's what I would say, like if you're in technology development program and you're not siloed, you can do whatever you want as long as you actually take advantage of the training and try to network and try to get to the area you want. So that's actually what I originally did, was like I want to do product management at a certain point. And I was like, okay, let me look at all the trainings. And I did sign up for one, but unfortunately I left before I was able to do that training one, which was basically a certification for PM and PO safe certification. And then from that particularly, it was actually going into like networking with people, seeing if I could do the transfer. And that was like a big part of it. So after that, it really is like, how it's gonna be like is pretty difficult because once you find an area, you need to make sure that your team at your area that you're already sitting in actually is going to let you go. If you're coming in TDP, you may not have that issue because you're not really sitting in an area, but you do want to prove yourself that you can do projects in there and then transfer. But because I came siloed already, that was an issue. And I know a lot of people come in kind of siloed already, but when I came in with my TB class, I think like only 10 to 20% were siloed or like specialized from the very get-go without our consent. But that was just my personal experience. I really enjoyed the people that I worked with. I enjoyed everything that I learned, even though I didn't want to be in Workday Financials, everything I learned, like working with the clients, working with technology, learning how business works, because that's how I needed to deal with it. A lot of what I did was like not only just software implementation, it was also like change management. It was also business process optimization in general, like working with them to really get things to work. It's pretty cool because especially I had the opportunity being in Workday Financials to be in a very limited capacity. So for that reason, I had to do a lot on my own. But that allowed me to really step out and do a lot of things that I know other people that did not have an opportunity to do. So I was essentially doing like what consulting level work, like level 9 kind of work. But a lot of times if I were to compare myself to another level 11, level 10 of like HCM or a different practice, they're doing like preparing slide decks. They're doing note taking. They're doing very basic work with not that much visibility. There's still projects out there where you do get a lot of visibility and you get to step up, but that's, you have to have a very specialized skill set. You have to build that trust, and a lot of times networking when it comes to those projects, like if they know that you're a good person with this particular responsibility, you want to be able to show up and do that exactly. Either through a +1 or through doing that from your own work, from previous projects. That's all very important to be able to do. And for me particularly, I was lucky that from month 3 I was able to do that, and because of that I was able to get a lot of projects. And of course, like when it came to 2021, not that many projects out there for me personally, but eventually it did lead me to a really cool role at Google. So that's it, everyone. I know this was like a lot, and I personally really enjoyed my experience at Accenture and a lot of the opportunities that it has opened the door. I get a lot of recruiters knocking down my door saying like, oh, we hire people from Accenture, or that these are the types of people that we hired from, and this is why we think that you'd be a great fit. So like that's all I really have, and honestly you're gonna have to use this as one data point. Don't use this as the main data point as to like, oh, is Accenture for me? Because you really want to see how is it like for you when it comes to talking to many different people, and then you have to make an informed guess. It's not even a decision, it's a guess of like I said, like sometimes it's all about luck based off of your skill set, based off of how the market's doing, how the economy is doing, how the firm is doing. So that all it really was I have to say. And thank you so much. And leave me any questions and comments you have about Accenture in general. Now that I've left Accenture, I can be very honest, and definitely check out the video here. Definitely subscribe for that video that I want to talk about like the issues of consulting. That is like something that you will only know will exist until it happens to you. All right, see you guys next time. Bye.